Hey guys, I just napped. This is the middle of the day here, um, and I want to share this dream that I had. Um, so I'm gonna. There was a ton of stuff that happened before, but instead of trying to remember that, I was in this restaurant. Looked nothing like the actual place, but it was where I used to work, and I'm talking with my friend, and there's like this glass door between where we are and where the actual counter is, with like the person who's working there, who's the owner, and then like where the food is and stuff, so they can't really hear us, I don't think. There's music playing, so I'm kind of gauging the volume of the music, and we're talking, so I don't think they can hear us. I don't really care if they could. Um, and he like gets these two bowls of soup for us and brings them back, and I'm telling him this, argument I had with the owner that prompted me quitting, and um, then we go back into the place where she actually is, and we're standing there. Um, I think maybe he's waiting to pay, and then she says to me like in this kind of attitude, like, "Hey, like, can you uh hurry up, like she says hey, and like calls me by my name and says um like, what are you here for? I'm really busy or something like that. And then I kind of look at her. What did I say? I was like, oh, like, um I gave some sort of non-response. I said something, I forget what it was, but it was sort of like, I don't understand your question, but in a very, what did I exactly say? Like, I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure what to say," or something like that. And then, she's kind of looking at me and like has a sort of attitude, and is sort of like, it's just saying how it was busy there, how she's busy on it. And then I was like, "Oh, like when he ordered those two soups, one of them was for me." Like she. And then she's like, "Oh, okay." Like letting her know that I was there, that I had eaten something there. I wasn't there to talk to her. I had just gotten something to eat. And then she says, like speaking about that time when I quit, she's like, "Yeah, we had that, argument. Like it was, you know, embarrassing or not good. Like, it was a very, stressful time for her," she said, and then saying how, she like, said like not to talk about it or something like that. And then I put my arm on the counter, and I was just like, "You're not my boss, you're not my manager, and I don't have to do a damn thing you tell me." And she got kind of upset and just kind of like walked out from behind the counter, and then just like walked past me going somewhere. And then it said something like, "Well, it's really great to see you," and say her name or something like that, something super sarcastic. And I'm there with my friend, and then this other friend pops up who isn't like, this is a good friend in real life. Sorry, the guy who I went there with is a good friend in real life. This guy that just popped up, he's someone that actually both of us used to be friends with. So, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we were close friends with this guy, but we haven't really known him. So he kind of walks by us, kind of stands there, and it's kind of unclear whether he saw us or not. So I kind of tap him on the shoulder and was like, "Hey," kind of awkwardly. And then he was like, "Hey," and I was like, trying to make sure that he noticed me and who I was, and my friend and who he was, because he knew both of us well. And well enough that we would actually want to check up on him and stuff and see how he's doing. And so I was kind of starting to ask him about himself, and he was kind of a little bit removed, but still like keeping a conversation. So it was sort of an odd response. Something was slightly off. And then he went with us outside. He left with us, and we held this conversation. And he starts asking what I'm trying to do next year. Like what my plans are. And I'm telling him like that there's this program that it's a school, and I want to teach at the school. I'm saying that I want to go be a teacher there, and then he's asking me if I want to go there. And I was like, yeah. And then there was kind of like, actually, it was the first friend that was asking me that. Something got very confused there, because the other friend, the good friend, was asking me if I was going to go there. And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, oh. And then it kind of like got revealed that I was going to teach there, and he was saying like, well, you wouldn't say that. And then I was like, well, I was looking out at the sign of that the restaurant we were just in, and used there as an example. And I mean, it's an actual place. Let's just call it like McDonald's. It's like, yeah, it is, where I work, but like I could still say like, oh, I went to McDonald's and then I noticed they were closed. So like with the school, I could say, oh, I went to this, I went to, name of the school, and then they were closed. you know like you just refer to your work by the name of the place. You say I went there. um like I went to Harvard. You would say that, if you were working at Harvard, you'd say, oh, I went to Harvard and then they were closed or whatever. um just to say, that you were going there, not that you were actually attending as a student. So then the other guy, he starts asking me these questions. Like he's asking me like, like he's curious. And he's saying like, oh, like there's different branches of the school. So am I going to this one? Am I going to 2? Am I going to 3? And we're outside, and it's grassy there. And then, as I'm answering him, I notice that there's this other old friend. There's twins actually, who also are other old friends of my good friend. And they're somewhat socially awkward, and one of them comes up and is in our conversation, like sort of just stands near us and starts just sort of like responding in our conversation, just kind of being like, oh, yeah, no, yeah, no, and then kind of like walks off and starts doing that to someone else. Um, and then eventually I look down, and they're kind of like fiddling with my shoelaces or something, and I just kind of ignore it. And, well, yeah, in real life, these twins, one of them, you know, was always wearing red and loved the color red, and the other one was always wearing blue and loved the color blue. And on my shoes, I have one red lace and one blue lace in the dream. and they're black shoes. Um, and so, anyways, he's saying, "Did you go to the school number 1, 2, 3?" Like what I was applying to do, and I'm sort of starting to answer him like how I did one, but I sort of vaguely remember seeing the other ones. I don't think I told him that I remembered seeing them. I think I just said, "Yeah, I don't really have that much information. I just applied to one." And then he's like, "Oh, are you doing it for like a half year? Or like, are you going to do that for half a year and then take courses somewhere for half a year?" And I was like, "Oh, he said that kind of more like as more aggressively, like as if he's insinuating like this is what you're doing or something like that." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure." Um and at this point I still think that he's just kind of like trying to do small talk, like ask me about this. And then but somehow maybe he just starts to tell me, or I maybe ask him what he's doing. I think is what happened. I just eventually was like, "Yeah, and so like what are your plans for the year?" He tells me that he applied for this job also, and that there's two other people that did too. Three of them that all went to our school, and then one from another school. And the sort of implication was that they wouldn't hire all of us from the same school. And this was sort of like his reasoning for this all along, is to kind of like persuade me into applying to something different. And then he's telling me about uh how there's the 2 or 3 schools. Then he's telling me this other opportunity entirely where I can do like infomercials through one of like the other schools, like it's not working with students at all. um he used the word infomercial, um but it kind of felt like analogous to like an online teaching type of thing. And then I was like, "Yeah, but obviously that, the one that we applied to sounds cooler than that. It sounds better to actually work with the people or something." And he's, still not satisfied. He wants me to do something else. And then I think it was maybe at this point I noticed that there's sort of like this woman. There's a few of them maybe, and they're, I don't know how to describe it. It's something, they had a trait that is not analogous to the real world. It's something in a dream, sort of like the what's that called? That effect where, like with mannequins, where it looks kind of real but kind of not real. Um, and they basically were mannequins. I mean, they were not, they weren't sentient. They were robots basically, but looked very realistic and kind of had these like sunglasses and like long hair, and just looked very, you know they looked like very, realistic but also fake. And so it was, and they would, they wouldn't talk. And uh there was just sort of like other, you know people around. Like there was just this sense of there being other beings there, and then they were some of them that I kind of noticed. And uh what did I say next? Or I had just said how these schools sounded, the job we applied to sounded better. And then he maybe said, did he say directly that I wouldn't be able, that like only a few people could do it? I don't know. Oh, then what happened was I said like, "Yeah, so I'm still going to apply," but that, and then I kind of like was hesitant because I knew he still wasn't happy. So I just said like, I felt kind of uncomfortable doing this. It was sort of like I was at this point saying things that I didn't want to say, but kind of that I just felt obliged to do something for him. And so, he had kind of manipulated me to feel that way, and then I just had said like, but I'll look into those other things, and then I was kind of justifying it to myself, and I was just like, yeah, because like, there's no reason not to get that information or something like that. And then he kind of starts to leave. Then I look down and I see that these two twins had actually, one had sort of already done it and the other one was sort of in the process, and they were actually stealing my shoelaces. They removed my red lace and my blue lace, respectively. One was in the process of finishing it, and the other, and they were replacing them with black laces. And I started trying to kick my feet away, and they had actually also restrained my ankles. So they had tied my ankles somehow to the ground, so I actually couldn't walk or move. And at this point I was pissed at all of them. I was pissed at this one guy, because he was just kind of talking to me out of self-interest so that he could get this job. And I was pissed at these other guys for taking my fucking shoelaces. And I was like, come on, like, can you, like, give them, give them back, like, put them back. And they were just, totally ignoring me. And they finished completely lacing my shoes with black laces now. And everyone else had kind of left. And they just finished. They got my laces. My feet were still restrained, so I couldn't chase after them. And the three of them kind of walk off. And I yell out to them, I say, at this point, like, I don't consider any of you guys my friends, was what I said. So I was so mad. And then I look up and I see that one of these robot girls is still there. And I'm, I had my laptop with me as well. Just this laptop. And it was on the ground when all this was happening. And then, and it was kind of like in movies, where people are like, and you too, and I just looked up at her and it was like, and you too, get the fuck out of here. And this robot girl kind of stands there minutes and then turns and walks away. Then she turns around, she hasn't walked too far, she turns around and looks back at me, and she pulls out this machine gun. And she lifts it and she puts it right to her own head. And then she pulls it's like an automatic rifle, so she's somehow holding it with one hand, and just begins, opening rounds, but it's not actually firing. I mean, you could hear it fire and see it fire, but her head isn't affected by it. And, at this point, I'm kind of controlling her. I'm having her kind of, like, move the gun around, firing at everything. I have it fire right at me, and it doesn't do anything, and then I'm like, okay, whatever, she turns, no, she's still just standing there. I'm like, okay, well, she'll go away, I'm confident in that, And so then I'm like, okay, and then I just turn back to my laptop and I'm back to pick it up, and then the laptop explodes. Not from a bullet wound, but not from getting shot, but she makes the laptop explode right before me. And then I open it up and it's all, busted and damaged, and then she's gone. and then I woke up.